He offered me $50,000 to be his wife for 7 days, just to keep his daughter from finding out the truth. In just 48 hours, I had to transform from a struggling waitress into a grieving, yet loving mother figure. The relentless summer heat of Los Angeles was oppressive, matching the suffocating weight of his desperation. I felt like I was drowning in a lie before it even began. This is the unbelievable true story of one of our subscribers, Skylar from Santa Monica. If you have a story that needs to be told, drop a comment below and maybe you'll be next. My name is Skylar Hayes, and I'm 26 years old. For the past few years, my life has been a constant juggle between my dream and my reality. By day, I'm a freelance graphic designer, pouring my heart into creating beautiful logos and websites for clients who often have no idea how close I am to the edge. By night, I put on a stiff uniform and work as a server in a high-end restaurant in downtown LA, smiling through the fatigue as I cater to the wealthy and privileged. It's a humbling experience, to say the least, but it's the only thing keeping a roof over my head. Or it was, until recently. The central problem in my life, the one that consumed every waking moment, was money, or the utter lack of it. I live in a tiny studio apartment in a building that's seen better days. The rent is astronomical for what it is, but it's all I could afford. Last month, I received the final notice for eviction. The paper felt heavy in my hands, like a death sentence. I remember staring at the words, my vision blurring with tears as the reality sank in. I had 30 days to come up with the back rent, or I'd be on the street. But it wasn't just the rent. My younger sister, Emma, is in college, and I've been helping her with tuition and living expenses. Our parents aren't in the picture, so it's always been just us. Then there are the medical bills. A few years ago, our mom had a sudden health crisis, a massive heart attack that required emergency surgery and a long recovery. The insurance didn't cover everything, and I took on the debt to save her. She's okay now, but those bills are still haunting me, a ghost from a past I can't escape. My bank account was critically low. I'm talking down to the last $100, with paychecks that barely cover the minimum payments on my credit cards. Every day was a calculation. Which bill could I postpone? Which meal could I skip? I felt a constant, gnawing anxiety in my stomach, a fear that was so pervasive it became my normal. I'd lie awake at night, listening to the sounds of the city, wondering how I had gotten here. I worked so hard, I was talented, but it never seemed to be enough. The weight of it all was crushing me. I was out of options. I had applied for every loan, asked for every extension, and even swallowed my pride to ask a few friends for help, but everyone was struggling in their own way. I felt completely alone, trapped in a cycle of scarcity that I couldn't break. The turning point came on a particularly brutal late-night shift at the restaurant. It was a Thursday, and the place was mostly empty except for a few stragglers. I was exhausted, my feet aching, my mind racing with worries about the eviction notice I had received that morning. I was wiping down tables, trying to hold back tears, when I noticed him. A man, sitting alone in a corner booth. He was well dressed in a tailored suit, but he looked distressed, his posture tense, his eyes fixed on nothing. He hadn't ordered much, just a coffee he barely touched. I remember thinking he was handsome, but in a way that felt distant, like a character from a movie. When he finally stood to leave, he dropped a small, folded note on the table. I almost didn't pick it up, assuming it was trash, but something made me reach for it. It was a crisp, white piece of paper with a phone number written in elegant script, and below it a single sentence. Your life is about to change. My heart skipped a beat. Was this some kind of prank? A cruel joke? I looked around, but he was already gone, vanished into the night. I stood there, holding that note, feeling a mix of confusion, fear, and a tiny, dangerous spark of hope. In that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The next day, I found myself standing outside a prestigious art gallery in Beverly Hills, my heart pounding like a drum. The note with the phone number felt like a burning coal in my pocket. I had called, my voice trembling, and he had asked to meet here. Now, walking through the silent, echoing halls filled with abstract paintings and sculptures that probably cost more than my life savings, I felt completely out of place. The air was cool and smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume, a stark contrast to the greasy din of the restaurant. A reserved assistant led me to a secluded back room. a space that was more like a private library than part of a gallery, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a single, large oak desk. And there he was, Daniel Maxwell. He was even more imposing up close, with sharp features and eyes that held a deep, unsettling sadness. He was handsome, yes, but in a way that felt carved from ice and grief. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, my hands clutching the straps of my worn-out bag. He didn't waste any time. He explained he was a widower, that his wife, Chloe, had died in an accident a little over a year ago. And then he said the words that made my blood run cold. He told me about his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, how she was struggling, really struggling, with the loss of her mother. Her birthday was in a week, and there was a family tradition, a specific, important ceremony held at their estate that required both parents to be present. It was something his wife had started, a whole week of activities leading to a final party, and Lily was desperately clinging to the hope that her mother would somehow be there in spirit. But Daniel said Lily's grief was so raw that she had convinced herself her mom was just away and would return for her birthday. The doctors, he claimed, were worried about her mental state. He looked at me, his voice low and intense, and made the unbelievable offer. He needed someone to pose as his late wife for just 7 days, to be a mother figure to Lily during that birthday week, to lie to a grieving child. I felt the room spin. My mouth went dry. You want me to lie to a child about her dead mother? The words tumbled out of me, laced with disbelief and a sharp edge of anger. How could anyone ask such a thing? It felt monstrous, a violation of something sacred. I told him it was wrong, that it was playing with a little girl's heart in the most cruel way. I started to stand, ready to walk out, but his voice stopped me. It cracked with a desperation I hadn't expected. He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. "Do you think I don't know that?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. Every day I look at my daughter and I see her fading. This tradition, it was everything to Chloe. It's the only thing Lily has left of her. If she goes through this birthday without both parents there, her therapist thinks it could break her. He spoke of Lily's fragility, how she had stopped speaking for months after the funeral, how she still slept with her mother's old scarf. He painted a picture of a little girl on the brink, and his love for her was palpable, a raw, aching thing in the room. Then he mentioned the money. $50,000. For 1 week. The number hung in the air between us, vast and impossible. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It would erase my debt, save my apartment, secure my sister's future. It was a lifeline thrown to me in the middle of a stormy sea, but it was attached to a chain of lies that felt like it would drag me down into the depths. I just sat there, staring at him, completely torn between horror and a terrifying, budding hope. I left the gallery in a daze, the world outside feeling surreal and distant. The opulence of Beverly Hills seemed to mock my ragged jeans, and the worry etched on my face. Daniel Maxwell's words echoed in my mind, a tangled mix of desperation, and a lifeline I never saw coming. $50,000. It was a number that belonged in a fantasy, not in my reality of counting pennies and dodging landlord calls. But the cost, the cost was a weight on my soul. To lie to a little girl about the most fundamental loss in her life. I felt sick just thinking about it. My stomach was in knots the entire bus ride home, every bump in the road feeling like a judgment. When I finally stumbled into my small studio apartment, the first thing I saw was the bright yellow envelope taped to my door. My heart sank. I didn't need to open it to know what it was, the final notice of eviction. I peeled it off, my hands trembling, and read the cold, formal words. I had 72 hours to pay the full back rent, or the locks would be changed. 72 hours. I slid down the wall onto the floor, the paper crumpling in my fist. This was it. This was the end of the line. I had nowhere to go. No family to take me in. No friends with spare rooms. The fear was a physical thing. A cold hand squeezing my chest, making it hard to breathe. I was going to be homeless. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was my younger sister, Emma. I forced a cheerful tone, trying to hide the panic in my voice. "Hey, Em. What's up?" But I could hear the tension in her silence. "Sky," she said, her voice small and hesitant. "I'm so sorry to ask, but my tuition payment for next semester is due. I know you're stretched thin, but I got a notice that if I don't pay the deposit by the end of the week, I'll lose my spot in the nursing program." She started to cry softly. I don't know what to do. You're the only one I have. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the wall. The weight of it all was crushing me. My eviction, her dreams, our future. It all rested on my shoulders, and I was failing. I promised her I'd figure something out, that she shouldn't worry, but the words felt like ash in my mouth. After I hung up, the silence in the apartment was deafening. I looked around at the few things I owned, the secondhand furniture, the stack of design portfolios I was proud of, the photo of me and Emma smiling on a better day. All of it could be gone in an instant. And then I thought of Daniel's offer. $50,000. It would solve everything. It would pay my rent for a year, cover Emma's tuition, and wipe out the medical debt that had been hanging over me like a shadow. I could breathe again. I could actually live, not just survive. But then I thought of Lily, a little girl who had lost her mother. I pictured her face, imagined her trusting eyes looking up at me, believing I was some kind of miracle. How could I look into those eyes and feed her a lie? How could I pretend to be the ghost of a woman she loved so deeply? It felt like a betrayal of everything I believed in. My moral compass was screaming at me that this was wrong, so fundamentally wrong. I was a good person. I helped people. I didn't deceive grieving children. This wasn't me. Was I really so desperate that I would sell my integrity? Was I about to become the kind of person who does terrible things for money? The internal debate raged inside me, a war between my desperation and my soul. One side argued that the lie was a smaller evil compared to the complete ruin that awaited me and my sister. That I would be doing it for a good reason, to save us. That maybe, just maybe, I could bring some comfort to Lily for a few days. The other side, the louder side, told me that there was no justification for this. That the damage to Lily could be permanent. That I would have to live with this guilt for the rest of my life. I didn't sleep that night. I paced the small floor of my studio, the eviction notice and my sister's tearful voice on a loop in my head. I stared out the window at the city lights, wondering how many other people were making impossible choices in the dark. I thought about Daniel's desperate love for his daughter. I thought about my love for my sister. Was I any different from him? We were both desperate to protect someone we loved. But at what cost? As the first hints of dawn painted the sky, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale, with dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a ghost, and I knew I couldn't become one. I couldn't let fear and desperation define me, but I also couldn't let my sister down. I had to try. I had to believe that I could control this, that I could do this one terrible thing for a greater good and somehow make it right. With a shaking hand, I picked up my phone and called Daniel. When he answered, his voice was alert, as if he'd been waiting. I took a deep, shuddering breath and said the words that would change my life forever. I'll do it, but you tell her the truth the second this week is over. Every word. There was a pause on the other end, and then a simple, thank you. I hung up, the phone slipping from my grasp, and I cried. I cried for the lie I was about to live, and for the truth I hoped would eventually set us all free. The Maxwell Mansion in the Hollywood Hills was less of a home and more of a monument. It was enormous, all sharp angles and cold, white stone, jutting out from the hillside like a fortress. As I stepped inside, the silence hit me first. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air before a storm. The summer heat couldn't penetrate the chill in here. The entry hall was a vast space with vaulted ceilings, filled with priceless modern art on the walls, abstract sculptures, and paintings that felt emotionless and cold. There was no warmth, no personal touches. It was a gallery, not a place where a family lived. I felt small and insignificant, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor, a trespasser in a world of curated perfection. Daniel introduced me to the staff, a housekeeper and a butler, but they were as still and silent as the statues around them. They offered tight, polite smiles, but their eyes never quite met mine, and I noticed they avoided looking directly at Daniel, too. It was subtle, but it was there. A flicker of fear, or maybe resentment, in their subdued demeanor. It made the back of my neck prickle. This wasn't just a house of grief, it felt like a house of secrets. Daniel showed me to my room, a lavish guest suite that was too perfect, like a hotel room no one had ever slept in. The bed was made with military precision, and the surfaces were dust-free and bare. It felt sterile, unlived in. I put my bag down, the only piece of my old life in this alien place, and I felt a wave of loneliness so intense it took my breath away. The first time I met Lily, it was in the grand living room. She was a tiny thing with wide, serious eyes the color of stormy seawater. She didn't run or shout like a normal 7-year-old. She just stood there, holding a worn-out teddy bear, and studied me. Her gaze was unervingly direct, taking in every detail of my face, my clothes, my nervous posture. "You have different hair," she said, her voice soft but clear. My heart stammered. Daniel had given me a photo of Chloe, and my hair was similar, but not the same. I forced a smile, my cheeks aching with the effort. I tried a new style," I stammered, feeling like the worst kind of fraud. She just nodded slowly, not smiling back, and I saw intelligence in her eyes that felt far older than her years. Throughout that first day, I felt her watching me. During an awkward lunch, I fumbled with my napkin, and I caught her looking at my hands, a slight frown on her face. When I tried to tell a story about a memory Daniel had fabricated, she listened intently, but her eyes narrowed just a fraction, as if she was detecting a false note in a song she knew by heart. Every moment of uncertainty I had, every hesitant pause, she seemed to notice. It was exhausting, living under that microscope, and it made the lie feel even heavier. That night, after a tense, silent dinner, I couldn't sleep. The mansion was too quiet, the silence pressing in on me. I decided to explore, telling myself I was just familiarizing myself with the layout. I found myself outside the master bedroom. The door was unlocked. I shouldn't have gone in, but a compulsion drew me forward. The room was immaculate, dominated by a huge, cold-looking bed. On the nightstand was a silver-framed photograph of Chloe. She was beautiful, with a warm, laughing smile that seemed out of place in this mausoleum. But the frame was always slightly turned away, as if someone didn't want to look at it directly. It was a small thing, but it nagged at me. Then I saw the wall safe, cleverly concealed behind a painting. I don't know what made me do it, but I tried the combination Daniel had foolishly used for the front gate, Lily's birthday. It clicked open. My hands were shaking. Inside, there were some documents, a jewelry box, but in the very back, there was a small, hidden compartment. It was empty, completely empty, but it wasn't dusty. It felt like something had been recently removed. What was in there? What was so important it needed to be hidden and then taken away? I retreated to my guest room, my mind racing. The emptiness of that compartment felt more ominous than any object could have. I felt a growing certainty that I was in way over my head. Back in my room, I paced, the plush carpet muffling my steps. I tripped over a slightly raised floorboard near the window. I knelt down, running my fingers over the old wood. One board was looser than the others. With a bit of prying, I managed to lift it. And there it was. Hidden in the darkness beneath the floor was a small, worn, leather-bound diary. It wasn't digital. It was old-fashioned, with handwritten pages. My breath caught in my throat. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was Chloe's. I clutched it to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. This was the truth I had been feeling in the air, in the silence, in Lily's watchful eyes. I didn't open it yet. I just held it, sitting there on the floor in the dark, knowing that whatever was written inside this book was about to shatter everything. I waited until the house was completely silent, the only sound the distant hum of the city below. Sitting on the floor with my back against the door, I opened Chloe's diary. The first page was dated just a few weeks before her death. Her handwriting was elegant but hurried, as if she was pouring out her thoughts in a rush. At first, it was about Lily, her love for her daughter, her worries about her happiness. But then, the tone changed. She started writing about Daniel. She called him controlling and manipulative. She wrote about how he isolated her from her friends, how he monitored her calls, how every aspect of her life had to be approved by him. She felt like a prisoner in her own home. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. Then, I found the entry that made my blood run cold. She was planning to leave him. She had secretly contacted a lawyer and was gathering evidence. She wrote about a family tradition she had created, the birthday week for Lily. But it wasn't just a tradition, it was her cover. She was going to use the final ceremony as a distraction to escape with Lily. She had booked a flight to New York to stay with her sister. But then, the last entry. Her words were frantic, scared. She had found something. She believed Daniel had discovered her plan. She wrote, "He's been asking too many questions about the plane. He was in the hangar yesterday. I'm scared. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. He knows about the trust fund. He needs me to be the perfect wife for one more day to get the money." I closed the diary, my whole body shaking. Chloe wasn't grieving before she died. She was terrified. And Daniel didn't just want a wife for his daughter. He needed a stand-in to commit fraud and access millions. The birthday party was in full swing in the garden below. I could hear the laughter of children, the clinking of glasses. I felt like I was moving through a nightmare. I had to act normal for Lily. I smiled and played the part, but every time I looked at Daniel, I saw a monster. He was charming, greeting guests, but his eyes were cold and calculating. I saw him watching me, a subtle question in his gaze, as if he sensed my shift. Lily was holding my hand, her small trust making my heart ache. I knew I had to confront him. I couldn't let the charade continue. I waited for a moment when he slipped away, heading towards a study. I excused myself, telling Lily I needed to get a present, and I followed him. I found him in the study, pouring himself a drink. He turned, a fake smile on his face. "Skylar, is everything all right? The guests are waiting." I closed the door behind me, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. "I know," I said, my voice low but steady. "I know the truth, Daniel." I held up the diary. His face went pale, but he tried to maintain composure. "What is that? Where did you get it?" I stepped closer, my anger giving me courage. Chloe wasn't grieving, she was scared. And that tradition. It was her plan to escape you. I spat the words at him, watching his mask crack. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he hissed, moving towards me. "That woman was unstable. She was going to take my daughter from me. But I stood my ground. She knew you were going to sabotage her plane. She knew you needed her to play the perfect wife for the trust fund. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The money." The truth was out, hanging between us like a weapon. Daniel's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. "You think you're so clever," he muttered, not looking at me. "Yes, the trust fund. Chloe's family set it up. It's a substantial amount, tied to their estate. To access it, I have to present a united family front at the specific ceremony on Lily's birthday. If I don't, the money goes to her estranged sister. I've spent years building this company, but I've had setbacks. Without that money, I lose everything. The house, the business, everything." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading now, but not for forgiveness, for understanding. Chloe was going to ruin me. She was going to take Lily and the money. I couldn't let that happen. I loved her, but she left me no choice. His confession was cold, devoid of real remorse. He saw it all as a business transaction. My role was to be his pawn, to help him steal what wasn't his. I felt a chill deeper than any I'd felt in this cold house. I was standing in a room with a man who might have killed his wife, and I was part of a scheme. I had to get out, and I had to protect Lily. I knew I had to be careful. Daniel was already suspicious after our confrontation in the study. The air in the mansion was thick with tension, and every time he looked at me, I felt a chill. I had Chloe's diary, but I needed proof that couldn't be easily destroyed. That night, after everyone was asleep, I took my phone and began photographing every crucial page. My hands shook as I worked, the silence of the house feeling like it was watching me. I focused on the entries where Chloe detailed her plan to escape, her fear of Daniel, and her suspicions about the plane. Then, I found the pages about the trust fund. She had written down the name of a law firm, the key clauses, and the requirement for the perfect family presentation at the ceremony. I photographed it all, making sure the handwriting was clear. I also took pictures of the empty compartment in the safe, noting the date and time. This was my insurance. I couldn't go to the authorities yet. If I did, Daniel might cover his tracks, and the truth about Chloe's death might never come out. I had to wait until the ceremony, when the lawyer was present, and Daniel's motive would be exposed in front of a witness. It was a terrifying gamble, but I had to see it through. For Chloe. For Lily. The day of the final ceremony arrived. The garden was decorated with white flowers and fairy lights, looking like something from a dream. Guests mingled, laughing and chatting, completely unaware of the darkness lurking beneath the surface. Lily was dressed in a beautiful white dress, her face glowing with excitement. She held my hand tightly, and my heart broke knowing what was about to happen. I saw Daniel across the lawn, smiling and shaking hands, playing the part of the gracious host. He caught my eye, and his smile tightened. He knew I was a loose cannon. The family lawyer, Mr. Albright, a stern-looking man in a crisp suit, had arrived. He carried a briefcase with the documents that would release the trust fund to Daniel. The moment was approaching. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach, but I took a deep breath. I had to be strong. The ceremony began. Daniel stood next to me, his hand on my back, a possessive gesture that made my skin crawl. Mr. Albright opened his briefcase and laid out the papers on a small table. All that's required now is the signature of both parents, affirming the united family front, he said, his voice formal. Daniel picked up the pen, smiling at me, but his eyes were hard, warning me to comply. He signed his name with a flourish. Then he handed the pen to me. Everyone was watching. Lily looked up at me with so much trust and hope. This was it. I took the pen, but instead of signing, I placed it down on the table. Daniel's smile vanished. "Skylar," he said, his voice a low growl. "What are you doing?" I looked directly at Mr. Albright. "I cannot sign these papers," I said, my voice clear and steady, though I was trembling inside. "Because this is all a fraud. Daniel Maxwell is not a grieving widower. He's a man who may have killed his wife for money." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's face turned purple with rage. "How dare you!" he shouted, stepping toward me, but Mr. Albright held up a hand. "Let her speak," he said, his eyes sharp. I pulled out my phone. I have evidence from Chloe Maxwell's personal diary. She was planning to leave Daniel because he was controlling and abusive. She believed he was going to sabotage her plane to prevent her escape. And she wrote about this trust fund. I showed Mr. Albright the photos of the diary entries, zooming in on the key parts. Daniel needed a wife to stand in for Chloe at the ceremony to access the money. He offered me $50,000 to pretend to be her for a week. He lied to his own daughter about her mother's death and his motives. Daniel's composure shattered completely. "She's lying. That diary is a forgery. She's a desperate gold digger," he yelled, but his desperation was obvious. Mr. Albright scanned the images on my phone, his expression growing grimmer by the second. He looked at Daniel. "These are serious allegations, Daniel. The handwriting matches Chloe's, and the trust fund clauses are accurate." Just then, 2 police officers, who I had discreetly alerted earlier through a text to a trusted contact, arrived at the edge of the garden. Daniel saw them and froze. Mr. Albright nodded to them. "I think we need to have a long talk with Mr. Maxwell," he said. Daniel was taken away for questioning, his shouts fading as he was let out. The guests were in shock, whispering among themselves. Lily was crying, confused and scared. I knelt down and held her, telling her how sorry I was, that none of this was her fault. It was the hardest moment of my life. In the days that followed, the investigation unfolded. Daniel was charged with financial fraud, conspiracy, and was a prime suspect in Chloe's death after the diary evidence prompted a reopening of the case. I returned the $50,000 to the estate, wanting no part of his blood money. But Mr. Albright, impressed by my integrity and bravery, ensured that I received a substantial whistleblower reward from the estate for exposing the fraud and helping to protect Lily's interests. It was more than enough to secure my future. I paid off all my debts, secured a new apartment, and ensured my sister's tuition was covered for the rest of her degree. But the money felt different this time. It was earned through truth, not deception. I had stood up for what was right, and in doing so, I had found a strength I never knew I had. The weight of desperation was gone, replaced by a hard-won peace. I stand here now in my new apartment, and the silence feels different. It's not the heavy, oppressive silence of the Maxwell mansion. It's a peaceful, hopeful quiet. The first thing I did with the reward money was find a place that felt like mine. It's not huge, but it has large windows that let in the morning sun, and for the first time in years, I'm not afraid of the rent being due. The constant, gnawing anxiety that lived in the pit of my stomach is gone. I am no longer defined by financial scarcity. That feeling of being perpetually on the edge, of every decision being a life or death calculation, has lifted. I feel like I can finally breathe. But more importantly, I feel like I can finally be myself. The experience in that house, as terrifying as it was, showed me a strength I never knew I possessed. I faced down a monster not with fists, but with truth. I navigated a crisis that could have destroyed me, and I came out on the other side not just intact, but stronger. My moral compass, which I feared I had broken, is now my guiding star. I have an unshakable confidence in my own judgment, in my ability to do the right thing even when it's the hardest thing. I restarted my graphic design career with a stability I'd only ever dreamed of. I wasn't desperate for any client anymore. I could be selective. I could pursue projects that I was passionate about. And the first thing I did was invest in myself. I went out and bought a sturdy, reliable desktop computer. It wasn't the flashiest or the most expensive, but it was powerful, dependable, and entirely mine. I set it up on a proper desk by the window. Then, I opened my laptop, went to my bookmarks, and found all those saved searches for server jobs LA, waitress positions, immediate hire restaurant. I looked at them for a long moment, remembering the fear and exhaustion they represented. Then, I selected them all and pressed delete. It was a small, simple action, but it felt like a ceremony. It was me closing a chapter of my life defined by survival and opening one defined by purpose. I was declaring, to myself and to the universe, that I was a designer, an artist, and I would never again let circumstance force me to abandon my dream. But my thoughts often drift to Lily, that beautiful, perceptive little girl. I knew I couldn't just disappear from her life without a word. Through Mr. Albright, the lawyer, I sent her a letter. I didn't go into details. She's too young for that. I just told her that I was thinking of her, that she is brave and strong and so loved. I promised her that we would meet again one day, on better terms, when the world wasn't so confusing. I told her to always remember her mother's love, because that is a truth that can never be taken away. It was a subtle, encouraging letter, but I meant every word. I hope it gives her some comfort in the midst of all the chaos her father created. She deserves to know that there are people who care about her for who she is, not for what she can represent. This whole journey taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. I was offered $50,000 to live a lie. For a moment, I considered it. The money represented everything I thought I needed: security, freedom from debt, a chance to help my sister. But the cost was my integrity, and I learned that the price of integrity is always worth more than any amount of money. Money can be lost, stolen, or spent. But your integrity, your truth, that is yours forever. When you compromise your truth, you sell a piece of your soul. You become a shadow of yourself, living in fear of being exposed. But when you stand by your truth, even when it's difficult, even when it costs you everything you think you want, you find a different kind of wealth. You find self-respect. You find courage. You find a freedom that no one can take from you. Never let desperation force you to compromise your truth, because the truth, in the end, is the only thing that sets you free. It sets you free from fear, from lies, and from the prisons we build for ourselves when we think we have no other choice. I am free now, not because of the money, but because I chose to honor the person I am deep down inside. And that is a treasure no one can ever offer to buy. This journey has been the most profound experience of my life. This story shows us that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that define our character. I chose the truth over $50,000, and in doing so, I saved not only myself but indirectly that little girl from a life built on lies. It was a terrifying crossroads, but standing by my integrity taught me that our values are the one thing no one can ever take from us. If my bravery resonated with you, if this story touched your heart, I ask you to show some love. Hit that like button, because every like tells me that sharing this truth was worth it. Share this video with a friend who might need a reminder about the power of integrity, about staying true to yourself even when the world offers you an easy way out. And please, subscribe to this channel for more unbelievable true stories like mine. There are so many voices that need to be heard, and your subscription helps bring them to light. Thank you for watching, for listening to my story, and for being a part of this community. Remember, your story matters, no matter how ordinary or extraordinary it may seem. Until the next video, take care of yourselves and each other.